Family gatherings in my household were never about joy or warmth. They were obligations, forced traditions that came twice a year. One on Christmas and the other on my mother's birthday. These weren't events filled with laughter and shared memories. They were tense affairs where I played the role of the responsible one while my younger brother, Jake, basked in the glow of favoritism. Jake had always been the golden child. From the moment he was born, my parents treated him as if he could do no wrong. If he failed a class, it was the teacher's fault. If he lost a job, his boss was unreasonable. If he hurt someone, there was always an excuse ready. Meanwhile, I, the older sibling, was held to an impossible standard. I was punished for things beyond my control, like bringing home an A instead of an A+. My achievements were expected, not celebrated, and my struggles were dismissed. By the time we reached adulthood, the pattern had only worsened. Jake, at 34, had never held a stable job for more than 6 months. He still lived at home, rent-free, bill-free, and chore-free, while my parents supported him entirely. They covered his expenses, excused his failures, and ignored the fact that he was a grown man refusing to take responsibility for his life. Meanwhile, I had worked hard to become independent, carving out a successful career, owning my own home and providing for myself. But despite my efforts to create my own life, my parents always saw me as their safety net. Someone to bail them out whenever they needed help. For years I tolerated it. I lent them money when they asked, fixed things around their house when they needed it, and even acted as an emotional support system whenever Jake's relationships fell apart. It was exhausting, but I did it because I thought maybe, just maybe, one day they'd appreciate me. But that day never came. Instead, they continued to enable Jake while taking my presence for granted. Then one day I had enough. I realized I was done being the fallback plan. I was done being the responsible one who always had to clean up after everyone else's messes. So, I made a decision, one that would change everything. I sold my house. It wasn't an impulsive decision. I had been planning it for months, ensuring every detail was handled before I made my move. And when the next family gathering rolled around, I walked in knowing that, for the first time in my life, I had taken control. I wasn't going to let them dictate my future anymore. What I didn't expect, however, was that my parents had already made a plan of their own, one that involved my house and my brother. The family gathering that day felt different, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. My parents were unusually cheerful, greeting me with an enthusiasm that felt forced. My brother Jake lounged on the couch as always, scrolling through his phone with a smug expression. Something was off, but I didn't realize just how off until my mother, with her usual performative sweetness, gestured for me to sit down. "We have something exciting to tell you," she announced, casting a glance at my father, who nodded eagerly. I leaned back in my chair, already bracing myself. "Jake is finally ready to move out on his own," my father said. I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" My brother, who had never shown the slightest interest in independence, smirked but said nothing. "Yes," my mother continued, "and we've come up with the perfect solution. It just makes the most sense. He's going to move into your house." Silence filled the room. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "My house?" "Yes, dear," my mother said, as if explaining something obvious. "You don't really need that big place all to yourself, do you? And poor Jake, he's had such a hard time lately. This would give him a fresh start without all that pressure." I stared at her, stunned. "You do realize I sold my house, right?" The forced smiles faltered. My father frowned. "What do you mean you sold it?" "I mean exactly that," I said, my voice steady. "I put it on the market, found a buyer, and the sale finalized last week. It's not mine anymore." For a moment no one spoke. Then, all at once, the disappointment, the anger, and the sheer entitlement came rushing out. "How could you do that without telling us?" my mother demanded, her voice shrill. "That was supposed to be Jake's chance," my father added, his face turning red. Jake predictably just scoffed. "Wow. So selfish," he muttered, shaking his head. "You know how much I needed that place." I let out a hollow laugh. "You needed it? That was my house. I bought it with my own money. You had no right to make plans for it behind my back." "But we're family," my mother insisted. "You know we always look out for each other. You should have thought about Jake's future." That was the breaking point. For years I have thought about this family. I have worked hard, paid my own way, and helped you every time you asked. Meanwhile, Jake has done nothing but take, and you've let him. And now you expect me to hand over my house like it's some kind of charity project? No. The shock on their faces would have been comical if the situation wasn't so frustrating. You have no idea what Jake has been through, my mother cried, playing her usual sympathy card. He's struggling. And whose fault is that? I shot back. Certainly not mine. The argument continued, but I had already made up my mind. They weren't angry that I sold the house. They were angry that I had taken away their ability to use me. To them, I wasn't a person, I was a resource, a convenient safety net for when things went wrong. But not anymore. I stood up, grabbing my coat. I'm done, I said simply. You want to coddle Jake forever? Go ahead. But I'm not going to be a part of it. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving behind not just the argument, but the years of resentment that had weighed me down. For the first time in my life, I was free. Walking out of my parents' house that evening should have felt liberating, but the weight of the confrontation lingered like a storm cloud over my head. I had finally stood up for myself, drawn the line that should have been drawn years ago. Yet, as I drove home, my hands clenched the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with the aftermath of what I had just done. The first consequence came swiftly. My phone buzzed with a flood of text messages, first from my mother, then from my father, and finally a single predictably passive-aggressive message from Jake. Mom, I can't believe you would do this to us. After everything we've done for you, I hope you realize how much you've hurt this family. Dad, we are extremely disappointed in you. You should have consulted us before making such a selfish decision. Jake, wow. Thanks for ruining my life. Hope your house money makes you happy. I sighed, tossing my phone onto the passenger seat. This was exactly what I had expected: manipulation, guilt-tripping, and zero acknowledgement of how unfair their demands had been. Still, it hurt. For as long as I could remember, I had been the responsible one, the one who worked hard, made good decisions, and most importantly, picked up the slack whenever my family needed me to. That role had been drilled into me so deeply that even now, a part of me felt guilty for breaking free from it. But another part, the part that had spent years simmering in quiet resentment, knew this was the only way forward. The next few days were eerily silent. No more texts, no phone calls. The absence of their usual meddling should have been a relief, yet it felt oddly unsettling. Had they given up that easily? I got my answer soon enough. A week after the confrontation, I received a call from my aunt, my mother's older sister. She rarely called, and when she did, it was usually for special occasions. I heard about what happened, she said, skipping any pretense of small talk. Her tone was neutral, but I could hear the curiosity underneath. I let out a small sigh. Let me guess. Mom called you. She did, my aunt admitted. She's very upset. She says you abandoned the family when they needed you the most. I scoffed. Of course she does. Did she also tell you that they planned for Jake to take my house without even asking me? There was a pause. Then, to my surprise, my aunt let out a short laugh. That part she conveniently left out, she said. But it doesn't surprise me. I blinked. Wait, what? I love your mother, but she's always coddled Jake too much. And your father. He goes along with whatever she wants. I figured something like this would happen eventually. For the first time since the argument, I felt a small sense of validation. So you don't think I was wrong? I asked hesitantly. Absolutely not, she said firmly. You worked hard for what you have. You don't owe it to anyone, least of all Jake. But you know how your mother is. She's going to hold on to this grudge for a long time. That I didn't doubt. After hanging up, I sat for a long moment processing everything. My family might have been silent, but they weren't done. If my mother had already gone to my aunt, it was only a matter of time before she started spreading her version of the story to everyone else. The guilt tried to creep in again, but I pushed it away. I had done the right thing. And for once, I wasn't going to apologize for it. Days passed, then weeks. The silence from my parents was unnatural, almost eerie. Growing up, I had never gone more than a few days without hearing from them, whether it was a check-in, a reminder about some family obligation, or more often than not, a passive-aggressive comment about how I should be doing more. But now? Nothing. I should have felt relieved, but instead, the tension only thickened. This wasn't over. My mother wasn't the type to let things go, and the longer the quiet stretched, the more certain I became that something was brewing beneath the surface. Then the first real blow came. It was a Wednesday evening when I got a text from an old family friend, Mrs. Dawson. "I heard about the situation with your family. I just want you to know that, despite what people are saying, you have every right to make your own decisions. Take care of yourself, dear." My stomach tightened as I reread the message. Despite what people are saying. What exactly were they saying? A pit formed in my stomach as I opened Facebook. I hadn't checked it in days, but as soon as I scrolled through my feed, I saw it. A long, emotional post from my mother. Family should be about love and support. But sometimes the people we trust the most can turn their backs on us in the worst way. We sacrifice so much only to be cast aside like we meant nothing. It's heartbreaking to realize that greed can make people forget where they came from. We never raised our children to be selfish, but I suppose money changes people. Hundreds of comments flooded in. Distant relatives, old neighbors, my parents' church friends, all offering sympathy and support. "You raised them better than that, Sharon. Stay strong. Some kids these days don't appreciate what their parents do for them. It's disgusting. I can't believe this. After everything you've done for them." The worst part? She never mentioned my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who she was talking about. My hand shook as I stared at the screen. It was one thing to argue in private, but this was public humiliation. A calculated move. She had painted me as the villain, a selfish, ungrateful daughter who had turned her back on her struggling family. I exhaled sharply, trying to contain the anger bubbling inside me. I had expected manipulation, guilt-tripping. But this was an outright attack. Before I could even think of a response, my phone rang. "Amanda." Mira's voice came through the speaker. "Have you seen it?" "Yeah," I muttered. "I saw it. She's making you look like some heartless monster," Mira said, frustration lacing her words. "And people are eating it up. What are you going to do?" I leaned back against my couch, rubbing my temples. "I don't know. If I respond, I'll look defensive. If I ignore it, she wins." "She's already rallying people against you," Mira said. "Even my mom called me about it. She thinks you should say something." The idea of airing my private life on social media made my stomach churn. But I also couldn't let my mother control the narrative. I spent the next hour drafting and deleting messages before finally settling on something simple and firm. There are always two sides to every story. I have nothing but love for my family, but I will not apologize for setting healthy boundaries. No one is entitled to the things I have worked for, and I refuse to be shamed for choosing what's best for my own future. I hit post and shut my phone off. The backlash came almost instantly. Boundaries? Since when does abandoning your family count as boundaries? Wow. Just say you don't care about them and go. So disappointing. I thought you were better than this. But for every negative comment, there was a message of support. Friends, former coworkers, even a few cousins who had always stayed quiet at family gatherings. Good for you. Family doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It's necessary. I respect you for standing your ground. Don't let anyone guilt you into giving up what you've earned. Still, the damage was done. My mother's post had turned the entire extended family into a battlefield. And the conflict was no longer just between us. It had spread. The next time my phone rang, it wasn't Mira. It was my father. I hesitated before answering. "Hello. You've gone too far," he said, his voice unusually cold. "Your mother is heartbroken. Do you even care?" I clenched my jaw. "Do you care how I feel?" There was silence. Then a heavy sigh. "This isn't how family should be." "Then maybe family shouldn't try to manipulate and control each other," I shot back. Another pause. "You should come over," he finally said. "Talk to your mother. Fix this before it gets worse." I almost laughed. Worse? It had already exploded. And from the sound of it, my father wasn't calling to make peace. He was calling to make me surrender. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I think we need some space," I said firmly. His silence stretched longer this time. "Fine," he said at last. "But don't expect things to be the same after this." The line went dead. I sat there staring at my phone, my heart pounding. I already knew things would never be the same, and I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. The lawsuit came faster than I expected. A thick envelope arrived in my mailbox one evening, the return address bearing the name of my parents' attorney. I held it in my hands for a moment, my stomach twisting, already knowing what was inside. When I finally tore it open, my worst fears were confirmed. A formal notice that my parents were suing me. The claim that I had unfairly benefited from family resources and now owed them financial compensation for years of support and investment in my education, career, and stability. I felt my body go cold as I scanned the pages, each word hitting me like a slap. They weren't just trying to guilt me anymore. They were taking me to court. I called Mira immediately. "They're actually suing me," I said, my voice shaking. "They're trying to argue that because they helped me with college and supported me when I was younger, I owe them money." There was silence on the other end, then a sharp inhale. "That's insane," she finally said. "They're your parents. They raised you. That's what parents are supposed to do." I let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, apparently they see it as a business investment. And now they want a return." Over the next few days, I met with a lawyer, a calm, level-headed woman named Lisa who assured me that my parents' case was weak. "They can't just demand repayment for raising a child," she explained. "Parental support isn't a loan. Unless you signed a contract agreeing to pay them back, they have no legal ground." Still, the idea of facing my parents in court sent waves of anxiety crashing over me. This wasn't just a dispute anymore. It was a full-blown war. And it wasn't just about money. It was about control. As the legal battle unfolded, my mother escalated her campaign against me online. She posted cryptic messages about betrayal and heartbreak, all while playing the victim to anyone who would listen. Family members took sides. Some sent me angry messages, calling me ungrateful. Others, quietly and privately, offered their support, though they dared not do so publicly for fear of my mother's wrath. When the court date finally arrived, I felt like I was walking into a nightmare. My parents sat on the other side of the room, my mother looking worn but defiant, my father avoiding eye contact. The judge listened patiently as their lawyer argued that they had made financial sacrifices for me with the understanding that I would eventually give back. Lisa countered swiftly, pointing out that no legal agreement had ever been made. "Raising a child is not a contractual obligation," she said firmly. "It is a responsibility, and once that child becomes an adult, they have the right to make their own financial choices." I stole a glance at my mother, expecting anger, but instead I saw something else, something almost desperate. Did she really believe she could win? Or was this just her last attempt to control me? When the ruling came down, it was exactly as Lisa predicted. The judge dismissed the case, stating that parents could not demand reimbursement for the cost of raising their own child. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by something else: exhaustion. This battle had taken so much out of me, and even though I had won in court, I knew I had lost something else. Whatever fragile connection I had left with my parents. As I walked out of the courtroom, my mother called my name. I turned, half expecting another guilt trip, another plea, another manipulation. But she just looked at me, her expression unreadable, and said, "You'll regret this one day." Maybe I would. Maybe I wouldn't. But at that moment, as I stepped outside and took my first deep breath of freedom, I knew one thing for certain. I had fought for myself. And for the first time in my life, I had won. Months passed after the lawsuit, but the damage it inflicted on my family ties was irreversible. The ruling had been in my favor, yet there was no sense of victory. Only the hollow realization that my parents and I had become strangers. The calls and texts stopped entirely. I wasn't just estranged from them, I was effectively exiled from the extended family as well. Holiday gatherings continued, but my name was never mentioned. Cousins who once laughed with me at family dinners now barely acknowledged me. The few who did still talk to me did so in secret, their messages always carrying an undertone of caution, as if being associated with me was dangerous. But despite the emotional weight of it all, I felt lighter in a way I hadn't before. There were no more late-night guilt spirals, no more anxiety over my mother's next manipulation. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself, not for their approval. My finances, once a constant source of conflict, were now fully my own. I had moved to a new apartment, a place entirely free of the ghosts of my past. It was smaller than my previous home, but it was peaceful. No one could barge in with demands, no one could hold financial support over my head. I had finally built a life on my own terms. Still, there were moments of grief. Grief for the parents I wished I had. Grief for the version of me that had spent years trying to earn love that was always conditional. Grief for the family I had lost, even if I had never truly belonged. Some nights I wondered if my mother ever regretted taking things this far. Did she ever think about calling? Did she ever miss me? Or had she convinced herself that I had been the villain all along? I would never know. One day Mira and I sat in a small cafe, catching up as the rain drizzled outside. She hesitated before bringing up my parents. "I ran into your dad," she said carefully, watching for my reaction. I tensed, but she continued. "He asked about you." He didn't say much, but I could tell he wanted to. I swallowed hard. Did he seem angry? Mira shook her head. "No, just tired. Like he wanted to say something but didn't know how." I didn't know what to do with that. Did it mean anything? Did I want it to mean anything? The truth was, even if my father reached out, things would never be the same. Too much had been said, too much had been done. Even if forgiveness was possible, trust was not. As I walked home that night, I thought about what my mother had told me outside the courtroom. "You'll regret this one day." But standing in my own space, in a life I had built with no strings attached, I realized she had been wrong. I didn't regret it. I mourned it, yes. But regret? No. Because for the first time I was free. And that was worth everything. Years later, the wounds had faded, but the scars remained. I no longer flinched when I heard my mother's voice in old voicemails. Nor did I feel the same sharp pang of loss when I saw family photos from gatherings I was no longer invited to. Time had softened the pain, but it had not erased it. My life had moved forward in ways I never thought possible. I had a stable career, a circle of friends who felt more like family than my own blood ever had, and most importantly, peace. A kind of peace I had never known growing up. One evening, as I sorted through old boxes, I found a birthday card from my parents from years ago. Back when things were still held together by the illusion of normalcy. The words inside were generic, a pre-written message with their names signed at the bottom. But for a moment, I allowed myself to remember the good times. The moments when I was still their child and they were still my parents before love became a transaction, before I had to fight for my independence at the cost of my family. It was strange how grief worked. It didn't come in waves anymore but in small quiet moments like this. Not long after, I received an unexpected email from my father. It was brief, carefully worded, as if he had rewritten it multiple times before pressing send. He didn't apologize, but he asked if I was doing well. If I was happy. It wasn't much, but it was something. I stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. In the past, I might have ignored it, but I had changed. So I replied, keeping it short, keeping it safe. "I'm doing well. I hope you are too." I knew we would never fully repair what had been broken. My mother would never admit fault, and my father, even if he wanted to, would never completely break free from her influence. But I had accepted that some wounds would never heal perfectly. Some relationships were meant to be let go, not because of hatred, but because holding on hurt more than leaving did. And as I stepped out into the evening air, feeling the cool breeze against my skin, I realized that I wasn't weighed down by the past anymore. I had survived. I had built a life that was truly mine. And that was enough.